In November of 1981 in Leominster, Massachusetts, people were sitting in a booth eating breakfast when the staff started asking them to leave. Same thing that week in Stoughton. Same thing in 445 other towns. Somewhere around 9,000 people lost their jobs in about 3 weeks, and the doors got padlocked with the coffee still warm on the tables. 2 years before that, this was the biggest full-service restaurant chain in America. 1,117 restaurants, 47 states. Open 24 hours a day, 10-cent coffee, 6 pancakes on a plate for one person. So how does the largest chain in the country empty out in 24 months? Everything you are about to hear turns on one piece of paper that a store manager signed and one decision about which column that paper went into on the books back in Santa Barbara. Let's get into it. Santa Barbara, California, 1957. Sam Battistone Sr. was in his early 40s and he had been in restaurants almost his whole adult life. During the Depression, he hopped a freight train west and landed in Glendale, where he took a job as a salad boy, chopping lettuce in somebody else's kitchen for somebody else's money. He worked his way up from that to running his own diner, a place called Sammy's Grill, for close to 20 years. And in the middle of the 1950s, he went to see a restaurant equipment salesman named Newell Bonnet about going in together on a spot down on the beach. Bonnet had flown for the Marine Corps in the war, and his father had been a Santa Barbara mayor, so the name was already on things around town. He knew equipment. Battistone knew what to do with it. What Battistone had was one sentence he repeated to anybody who would listen. "What this country needs," he said, "is a good 10-cent cup of coffee." That was the whole founding idea. Sell the coffee for a dime, keep it coming, and people come back for the rest of their lives. They put their names together. Sam and Bo. The doors opened on June 17th, 1957, right on the sand at 216 West Cabrillo Boulevard. 45 seats. 21 kinds of pancakes on the board. Open 24 hours a day. Coffee, 10 cents. Pancakes, 40 cents. That first summer, Battistone worked one grill and his 17-year-old son worked the other. His wife worked the floor. And for the first 6 years, not one price on that board went up. 6 years of rising beef and coffee and wages, and the same numbers chalked over the counter the entire time. Hold on to that address. 216 West Cabrillo. Out of everything you are about to watch collapse, that one building is still serving breakfast this morning. By late 1963, there were around 20 of these up and down the West Coast, each one doing roughly $300,000 a year. And if you are over 50, I do not have to describe any of this to you, because you have sat in one. You know the vinyl booth and the way it stuck to the back of your legs in July. You know the thick white coffee cup and the way the waitress topped it up before you asked and never wrote it on the bill. You know the laminated menu with the tiger on the front and the heavy glass tumbler the orange juice came in. And you know what they handed the kids, because half of you still have one in a drawer somewhere. A paper mask at the door, a cardboard glider that flew about 4 feet and then nosedived into the parking lot. A wooden nickel good for a nickel off the next coffee, which your father put in his pocket and kept for 11 years. The big breakfast was called the Papa Jumbo. Juice, eggs, bacon, and 6 pancakes. 6 for one person. And you know exactly where these buildings were. Off the highway. Next to the motel. On the road out of town past the last stoplight, with the lights on and the neon running when everything else out there was dark. In a lot of towns, it was the only public room that never closed. Truck drivers, nurses coming off shift, cops parked in the corner booth. A kid who had just dropped his date off and did not want to go home yet. Here is the thing to hold on to, because it explains every single thing that happens after this. The manager was the product, not the pancakes. Remember that. Now, the name. That is the first gun on the wall, and it does not go off for another 20 years. In 1899, a Scottish woman living in India named Helen Bannerman published a children's book, about 30 pages, tigers on the cover. The tigers end up chasing each other around a tree until they melt into butter, and that butter gets used to make pancakes. The founders always said the restaurant name was just Sam plus Bo. 2 men, 2 names. And that part is true. But they did not stop there. They put 7 murals on the walls of that first restaurant, and everyone came straight out of that book. They sold dolls at the register, they named the breakfasts after the characters, and in grand opening ads in Oregon they ran a tagline calling them the finest pancakes west of the Congo. A reference to Africa attached to a story set in India, printed in a newspaper in Oregon. So the defense and the decoration do not match. And somebody inside the company knew it, because by the early 1960s those murals had been quietly repainted. The character came back with lighter skin and a turban, and the change was never announced anywhere. Just different paint on the same wall one morning. Circle that. That is gun number 1, and it sits there loaded for 2 decades while the company gets rich. Section 2 now, gun number 2. Almost nobody talks about this one, and it is the one that does the killing. 1967, the chain is up to 67 restaurants, and it has the problem every restaurant company has, which is that a hired manager working the graveyard shift does not care as much as an owner does. Food walks out the back door. Portions get sloppy. And nobody at head office finds out for another 18 months. So they built something and they called it fraction of the action. A manager put up $20,000 of his own money, his savings, on the counter. In return, he got 20% of the profit of the restaurant he was running, and he could buy his way up to 50. Base salary was around $9,000 a year, so the salary was not the job. The percentage was the job. And it worked like almost nothing else in that industry ever has. Strong operators were reportedly seeing returns as high as 60% on the money they put in. These men were not employees. They counted the egg cases themselves. They cut the labor hours themselves. They stood in the parking lot at 11 at night, working out whether to send the second cook home. John Puccinelli, who ran the store off the highway in Concord, put it about as plainly as anybody can. He said they recruited us by saying that if you'll stay with the company for 10 years, you'll be set for the rest of your life. 10 years. Hold that number, because we are coming back to what it was worth. And a manager who believed it went and recruited the next one. Head office was not running ads for managers. Owner-operators were going to their own cooks and saying, "Look at my check, this is real, get in." Now pay attention to this next detail, because it is the whole video. When a manager handed over that $20,000, somebody in accounting had to write it down. And they wrote it down as income, not as a deposit, not as money being held on somebody else's behalf. Income, revenue. Which meant that every single time this company signed one more manager and opened one more store, the ledger looked healthier before that restaurant had sold a single pancake. The growth was paying for the growth, on paper, in a column where it did not belong. Gun number 2, loaded in 1967, sitting there for 10 years while everybody in the building celebrated. And watch the store count. 67 restaurants in 1967, 257 by 1972. In 1975 alone, they opened 125 new ones, which is a new restaurant every 3 days for 12 straight months. 869 by 1977, at which point they were the largest full-service restaurant chain in the United States. They were beating Denny's. They were beating all of it. The company went public around 1969, and Wall Street fell in love. because from the outside this looked like the cleanest growth story in American food. Nobody looked at where the operator's money was landing on the balance sheet because the number at the bottom kept going the right way. And while all of that is happening, there is a third thing, and it has nothing to do with breakfast. In March of 1974, a group led by the founder's son, Sam Battistone Jr., paid $6,150,000 for the 18th franchise in the National Basketball Association, the New Orleans Jazz. Pancake money bought an NBA team, and here is why that matters. The son, who was supposed to be minding this empire, was now flying to games and covering a team that lost money every single season it existed. So in the years the company would need the family watching the counter most, the family was watching a scoreboard, and the family fortune was quietly draining to cover it. That is gun number 3. Not a rival, not the economy. Attention pointed the wrong way. By 1979, the top of the mountain, 1,117 restaurants in 47 states, towns of 8,000 people with one sitting on the main road in. And think about what a day looked like for one of those owner-operators. Up before 4. In the building before the night cook goes home. Signing for the egg delivery himself. Because the $20,000 is his. On the floor through the breakfast rush. Back out front for dinner, deciding at 11 at night whether to keep 2 people on the graveyard or 1. Nobody made him do any of that. He did it because a piece of the profit was his. Income had gone from about $1 million in 1967 to $22.8 million in 1977. 1979 is as big as this ever gets, and it is the same year the losses start. If you are enjoying this trip back, do me a favor and hit subscribe so you do not miss the next one of these we dig into. Because the reason the losses started was already sitting in a government office in Washington, 2 years old waiting, Section 3 back in 1977, the Securities and Exchange Commission had started going through the books. And what the regulators concluded was that the $20,000 was never income in the first place. It was a deposit. It was somebody else's money, sitting in the profit column for a decade, making the whole operation look far healthier than it was. The reported profits depended on signing the next manager and the next one after that, which is the shape of a pyramid, and it got described that way afterward. The company had to restate its earnings downward, and it had to end fraction of the action. So go stand inside a restaurant in 1978 and be the man who put $20,000 on that counter. Head office tells you the plan is finished, we are buying you out, and here is what we have decided your piece is worth. The thing you were promised. The thing that had you counting egg cases at 5 in the morning for 11 years. Is being handed back to you at a number somebody in Santa Barbara picked without asking you. Remember what Puccinelli said they promised. 10 years and you are set for the rest of your life. Within 6 months, half the managers quit. Half of them. And then the lawsuits started. By the end of it, roughly 700 managers, about 70% of the people running these restaurants, had either walked away or gone to court. They organized. They called themselves SAPs, which stood for the Sambo's Association for Partnership Survival, and a name like that tells you exactly how those men felt about the deal they got. Charles Catton, a man who had bought in up in Portland, took the company to court in Oregon on a fraud claim and won $925,000. A jury looked at the deal this company offered its own managers and called it fraud. Now watch what happens to the money. 1977, the last full year of the plan. $22.8 million in income. 1978, the first year without it. $7.6 million. 1979, the biggest the company would ever be, and a loss of roughly $50 million. Same buildings, same booths, Same 21 kinds of pancakes. The only thing that changed was who was standing behind the counter and how much of the place they owned. The manager was the product, not the pancakes. And this is where gun number 1 goes off. For 20 years, that name had barely caused a ripple. On the West Coast, where the chain grew up, there was almost no organized objection at all. Then in the 1970s, the company pushed east into New England and the Midwest, into cities with completely different histories, and the name landed completely differently. And in Rhode Island, somebody did something nobody had thought to do before. They stopped arguing about the name and they went and counted. In December of 1978, the Urban League of Rhode Island, the local chapter of the NAACP, and 2 black residents filed a complaint. On March 18, 1981, the State Commission on Human Rights ruled against the company, finding that the name had the effect of telling black persons they were unwelcome because of their race. And the evidence that did the damage was not a legal argument. It was a survey. 238 people. 214 of them said they would not eat at those restaurants because of the name. That is not a protest group. That is a town telling a company, in writing, in 1981, that a lit sign on a highway was a closed door. In Massachusetts, the Attorney General argued the name was understood as a badge of slavery. And what did the company say? The General Counsel, working out of Santa Barbara, said they had 850 restaurants across the country, and you could count the problems on one hand. Now, here is where I want to be straight with you. The name cost this company real money. Permits, lawyers, years of fighting city councils, and every customer who drove past a lit sign and would not pull in. That is documented, and it belongs in the story. It is also not what closed the store in Boise, where nobody filed anything against them. Both things are true at once. The company was already bleeding out from an accounting decision made in 1967, and the name was the wound everybody could see. And there was more. 2 former executives were indicted in a cattle kickback scheme out of Texas. There were health complaints over rodents. Across 1980 and 1981 combined, this company lost nearly $90 million. Which brings us back to that breakfast rush in Massachusetts. Starting on the 9th of November, 1981, 447 restaurants closed. Somewhere between 9,000 and 10,000 people out of work in 3 weeks. On November 27th, the company filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. It was still operating 667 restaurants in 46 states on the day it filed. The New York Stock Exchange suspended the stock. The last price it ever traded at was $1.75. Then somebody had an idea that should have worked. By February of 1983, 618 of the survivors had been renamed Seasons Friendly Eating. Same building, same booths, same griddle, and a brand new sign carrying a name nobody in that town had ever heard. It did not take. You cannot rename a habit. A man had pulled into that same parking lot every Sunday for 18 years. Now the sign says something he has never heard of, and the manager who knew his order left 2 years ago. So he stops going, and once he stops, he never starts again. Because by then there is a drive-through on the way to church. And now gun number 3 fires. For 11 seasons, Battistone Jr. had poured something in the range of $17 million into that team, a fortune bleeding out the whole time the restaurants were sliding, so when the accounting finally blew up, there was no reserve left at the top to absorb the hit, because the reserve had spent a decade in New Orleans. By the mid-'80s, he had to sell the team just to stop the loss. Pancakes bought it in 1974. And the pancakes are what he burned through trying to keep it. And then Battistone Jr. made one more phone call. he bought back exactly one restaurant. The first one, 216 West Cabrillo Boulevard, the only location in the entire chain that had never once changed its name. That is the building I told you to hold on to. Around 1998, the founder's grandson, Chad Stevens, took it over, and he did the exact opposite of hiding. He refurbished the place and leaned all the way into what it had been. The murals stayed on the wall. The Papa Jumbo stayed on the menu. He sold replica wooden tokens good for a nickel off a coffee, the same nickel your father put in his pocket in 1964. Then came the summer of 2020. A petition went up asking the family to change the name, and it gathered more than 3,800 signatures. Stevens agreed. On July 14th, it was changed for good to Chad's, mounted on the same sign base that had stood on that corner since 1957. 63 years, almost to the month, from that first 10-cent cup of coffee. So who killed it? Nobody did, on their own. They each took a piece. The Northeast took the name, the regulators took the accounting, and the accounting took the managers, which was the only thing that ever really mattered. Because at the top, in 1979, there were still 1,117 buildings with the lights on and the griddles hot. There was just nobody left behind the counter who owned a piece of it, and therefore nobody left who cared whether the coffee was any good at 4 in the morning. The manager was the product, not the pancakes. And those people in the booth in Leominster never got told any of this. They just got asked to leave in the middle of breakfast on an ordinary morning in November. Now you know why. So tell me down in the comments which one you went to, the town, and roughly what year. And tell me if you still have the mask, or the glider, or one of those wooden nickels in a drawer somewhere, because somebody watching this absolutely does. If you want more of these, the ones that got bought, the ones that got renamed, and the ones that got padlocked on a Tuesday morning during breakfast, that is this whole channel, and there is another one waiting for you right now.